All right. So in this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit more about peak performance. Peak performance is something that we hear a lot, right? It gets thrown out as a term or a phrase or a particular state that people are trying to achieve. But what does peak performance really mean? How do you achieve it? How do you know when you're there? Now, in this episode, we're going to dive deep into what I call the 10 pillars of peak performance. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Mastering Mindset Podcast with Dr. Matt. The APA, the American Psychological Association, defines peak performance as when an individual performs at optimal levels, both physically, mentally, or both. Now, peak performance doesn't just apply to individuals. It can also apply to teams and organizations. Teams and organizations can also achieve peak performing states. And I believe that it is the leader's obligation and duty to learn more about how to create a peak performing culture that fosters more engagement with their team, more happiness in their employees, and ultimately, more fulfillment will create better results. So most organizations, most teams and leaders, they pursue quality service and quality products. That's what they're striving to do. They're really going after trying to get quality service and quality products. However, leaders of organizations, when you also prioritize well-being of your companies or your employees, if you also prioritize maybe psychological safety, making sure everybody feels safe to speak their mind freely without any fear of reprimand or judgment or criticism. Or maybe it's a culture where pursuing after great things is a norm. Pursuing after exceptional results is a norm. See, I always believe that every single organization, whether you're a Facebook or a startup or even a huge agency, every organization manages two systems. The first system they manage is a technical system. That is the day-to-day operations. That's their products and how to create and engineer their products and how to teach your employees in your company the products and the deliverables. The other system that every single organization manages is the social system. That's the level of engagement. That's the relationships. That's the culture norms. Whether they're spoken or unspoken, these are norms and rules that dictate high performance or peak performing cultures. Peak performing cultures attend to both. They attend to both the technical system and the social system. Most organizations that aren't yet peak performing focus primarily on just the technical system. The social system just happens as a default. They don't intentionally design it, but they just, they focus so much on the technical stuff and getting that right that they think the social system, the norms, the relationships, the culture, the trust, the team building, morale, they think it's just going to happen as a byproduct. If we just do good work, these relationships will just naturally happen. But what you come to find is that that does not naturally happen. You establish, or the company starts to establish a norm that may hurt you or may bite you in the butt if you're a leader. If you're intentionally designing it, though, if you are infusing your values, your core values, philosophy of practices, cultural norms, if that's very intentional with every meeting, with every engagement, and it's modeled from top down, all of a sudden you're managing and intentionally designing both the technical system and the social system. And that's a huge thing for peak performing leaders to understand and how to create a peak performing organization, right? So again, peak performing leaders can create peak performing teams and organizations when they focus intentionally on designing the technical system of their organization and the social system of their organization. That's number one. And in my own research, I've discovered that there are 10 pillars that create and make what we call peak performing states. Now, these 10 pillars are shared amongst great leaders and athletes, and even organizations. You'll see these 10 pillars be very common among these high performing, peak performing organizations. So whether it's an individual state or a team state, these pillars are going to serve as a guidepost for you to identify peak performance in your own life and in your own team. So here we go. I'm going to list them one by one, and we'll cover each single one in this episode. The way I like to call these 10 pillars as a guidepost to peak performance is the acronym PERFORMERS, right? So P, we're going to start with the first one. P stands for physical fitness. Now, if you look at peak performers, their body is their instrument. Whether you're talking about an executive like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, look at their bodies, right? It's not about looking good, but it's about feeling good and sustainability. The reason why executives and high-performing athletes, the reason why they take care of their body is because they fuel their body with good medicine, good fuel, so they can sustain and pursue after excellence for long periods of time. They don't fatigue as easily. If you are a peak performer, you're constantly on the go. You're flying from one country to another, from one event to the next, and your body has to be fit to be able to execute on those tasks and meet the demand that is there. So number one, the acronym PERFORMERS, P stands for physical fitness. Peak performers are physically fit, not about looking good, but it's about feeling good and being able to sustain the activity that peak performers often get themselves in. The next is excellence. Peak performers do not settle. They don't settle for mediocrity or just enough. They consistently set high bars and high standards for themselves and strive for excellence in everything that they do. They're very meticulous. They pursue after excellence. Even their practices and their rehearsals are very much really kind of all in. There was a clip that I watched of Madonna rehearsing with her dancers. And this was just a rehearsal in the studio, mind you. Madonna, at 60 something years old, was dancing her heart out in a rehearsal. She was going all in. She was sweating. She was holding the mic. She was doing and pursuing excellence even in a rehearsal. If you watch Tiger Woods practice, the way he warms up, the way he practices on the range, nothing's half-assed with peak performers. They're always all in. Peak performers are physically fit and they pursue after excellence in all that they do. The third is relationships. Now, if you watch peak performers and who they surround themselves with, they're always surrounding themselves with people that are making them stronger, better, and just better human beings, right? They cultivate a strong support system and strong relationships, not only with others and their support system, but also with themselves. They're constantly reflecting, pausing, figuring out how their mind works, how their body works, how their emotion works. They're constantly digging in to learn more about themselves. They are very self-reflective. They pause out of their days to journal. They think through their days. They vision, they manifest. They figure out what they like and what they don't like. So they have boundaries. They know what is good for them and what is not good for them, and they pursue after the things that are good for them. All this requires self-awareness. And self-awareness can only be developed and cultivated if you spend the time to pause and relate to yourself and to figure out what makes you tick and what ticks you off, right? To understand yourself. So the relationships, not only do peak performers surround themselves with a great support system, they also have a relationship with themselves that they cultivate and spend time in. It's an investment that does not get overlooked by peak performers. So we have physical fitness, we have excellence, and we have relationships. The next for performers, that acronym, is focus. Peak performers have unbelievable focus. It doesn't mean that they don't get distracted or they sometimes get unfocused. Of course they do. But when they set their mind on a particular task, whether it's an activity, it's a warm-up, it's a drill, it's a workout, they are focused. Watch them rehearse, watch them perform, watch them do any small thing that they set their mind and intention on doing. They're engaged and fully committed to that present moment focus. That's trainable. That's something that they had to train their mind to do. Now, focus, we talk about 4 different types of focus. And in our academy at MPGA, we dive into what focus is and how to do it. But what you need to know for this particular episode is that peak performers, they have unbelievable focus that they have trained. Yes, we are humans and we all get distracted, but they train themselves to refocus on the things that are important and the things that matter. Next in performers is the O, which stands for ongoing learning. Ongoing learning is this idea that I'm a sponge and I'm constantly learning. Peak performers, yes, they're confident and they're cocky, but they're always learning. They adapt this kind of beginner's mindset. And even though they are excellent at what they do, they're constantly a sponge, taking in their mentors and they're learning new things about their craft so that they can enhance their skills and get even better. Now, you think about this. I'm going to dissect Tiger Woods for a little bit. Tiger Woods, at the peak of his performance, he was working with a coach named Butch Harmon. And Butch Harmon's out in Las Vegas, and Butch Harmon coached Tiger all throughout his youth and into, multiple U.S. junior amateur wins and U.S. amateur wins, even in some of his professional career wins. But then Tiger Woods wanted more. He was constantly learning on getting better. So he switched coaches. A coach like Butch Harmon got him to his prime where he was swinging it so well. But Tiger Woods was constantly driving himself to be better and to learn more about himself and his swing. So he switched coaches. Then eventually he went to Hank Haney. He learned a whole bunch from him. And then he went to Sean Foley, learned a whole bunch from him. And he switched over to many different coaches. Chris Como, like you'll see a lot of coaches that have influences Tiger's swing and the way he performs. It's because that individual, that peak performer, Tiger Woods, was constantly on this journey of ongoing learning. They never stop. If you look at executives, top executives, for example, Bob Iger or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, if you watch these executives, they're constantly soaking in information and learning on the go. Bill Gates takes a week in vacation where he just calls it the Think Week. And he goes off in his island and all he does is read and inform himself and reflect. They're constantly developing and learning. So if these top excellent peak performers are doing this with the humility that they have for ongoing learning, then maybe we can also adapt that mindset of being more open-minded and being a sponge to learn more. The next in the performers acronym is resilience. Now, peak performers, they go through trials and tribulations. Many of them have gone through so much failure, and they would share their story of success, of what got them to where they are. And they often have a breaking point where they were about to quit. They lost all their money, all their resources, all their relationships, whatever it might have been. They hit rock bottom. If you listen to their stories, almost all peak performers have a rock bottom moment, but they didn't stop there. That wasn't the end of their story. They overturned that rock and kept going. They never gave up. They had a dream, they had a vision, a passion, a determination to move forward. Resilience is something that all peak performers have. That's what got them to where they are. The next letter in performers is mental fitness, is the M. Mental fitness, what is this? What does this mean? Peak performers are actively engaged in mental training. Either they're pursuing mindful practices, they do meditation and mindfulness every single day, they do breathing exercises, they train with a sports psychologist or an executive coach to help them think through things, to reflect, to pause. Mental fitness is constantly working and conditioning our thoughts, which impact our emotions, and understanding our emotions in a more intimate way to see how that really influences our output, our behaviors, our actions, our triggers. Peak performers are constantly working on their mental fitness conditioning just as much as they're doing physical conditioning and physical fitness. It's one and the same. They don't take mental fitness lightly. The next in performers is E, emotional agility. Many of us have heard the word emotional intelligence. It's really being able to understand our emotions and being able to kind of reflect that and bounce that with others in a relationship, right? What is emotional agility? Emotional agility is the ability to understand what our emotions are as data and learn to unhook ourselves from these emotions that usually get us off kilter, off the path that we are wanting to pursue. It's a term coined by Dr. Susan David, who wrote the book Emotional Agility. She's a Harvard professor, and it's a great concept of learning how to get emotionally unhooked, to just be cognizant, aware, and recognize that our emotions are data points. They're not us, or we don't have to react to every single emotion that we have. We can literally unhinge and unhook from an emotional reaction that we have. Just understand it, recognize it, let it pass, and then choose our response. So it's creating space between an emotional reaction and our response. That space is that ability to be emotionally agile. This is the concept of emotional agility. It's one of my favorites, and it was the work of Susan David. There's two more in performers. The last two letters we have is R for responsibility, and then S, closing it out for staying present. Let's talk about R, responsibility. Peak performers often have a mission, a passion, and a responsibility for something greater than themselves. We heard Simon Sinek's book start with why, and the why, the purpose, is often much greater than myself. Maybe I'm serving my family. Maybe I'm serving my country, or for women's rights, or for Korean Americans, or Black Lives Matter. Whatever it might be, we have a stronger passion and mission that is beyond myself. Maybe it's my faith, my spiritual walk in God, and my belief that God gave me these talents and I'm using them as a vehicle to be his light and his witness to the world. Connecting with your why, whatever it is, that's the responsibility that almost every peak performer that I know, they can articulate, they are aware of, and they practice. Responsibility. The last, to close us out on performers, is staying present. Peak performers have an uncanny ability to stay present. Was it natural? No, not at all. Was it trained? Yes, 100%. You can train yourself to be present. Right now, I want you to take a deep breath, and I want you to observe this breath as if you were a peak performer, focusing on it, being fully engaged with it, being still, and being singly present on this one breath. This is all I want you to do. Go for it. Take a deep breath and stay very focused on it. You see, staying present is a trained skill that you can develop by doing more of it. When we are caught up in an activity that we love to do, we're often engaged in the moment without even realizing it because we're having so much fun. Time goes by so fast. We go, oh my gosh, it's already time to go, or we're already done, because we're so fixated on the task at hand. We're having so much fun. We're fully engaged and we're present. Learning to stay present in whatever it is you're doing. For example, the next time you eat a meal, try to take one bite, fully engaged in the moment and staying present with it, being immersed in the activity at hand. This is trainable, but you have to train it. You have to do it. In order for you to become more of a peak performer, you have to recognize this acronym performers and utilize every single letter as its own practice. So I'm going to do a brief summary of performers again, and these guideposts will help you have more peak performance in your life. Number 1, P, physical fitness. You got to be physically fit if you want to be a peak performer. Your body doesn't have to look great. It doesn't have to have washboard abs and guns the size of Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's not physical fitness. Physical fitness means you're able to sustain the activities that are required for you to pursue as peak performers and not get fatigued, not get tired out. So you work out, you build up stamina. That's physical fitness. The pursuit of excellence, constantly setting high bars and high standards, high vision for yourself, what we call BHAG goals, big, hairy, audacious goals, right? BHAG, pursue after excellence. Relationships, make sure you have a support system that you can lean on, be vulnerable with, feel safe with, and trust, that uplift you, that encourage you, that are honest with you. But most importantly, have a relationship with yourself. Learn to dive into knowing yourself, understanding your triggers, spending time to reflect on your day. Focus. You gotta learn to train your mind to focus on the task at hand. You might get distracted, yes, but learn to refocus on whatever it is you were originally intended to focus on. Ongoing learning. Don't ever be too cocky to not learn. You gotta always, no matter how good you are in your task, in your activity, in your skill, ongoing learning is being humble enough to have a beginner's mindset, to learn more about yourself, to learn more about the skill, to constantly have this open-minded approach to learn and want to learn. resilience. Peak performers never give up, period. Mental fitness. Peak performers train their mind and exercise their mental skills just as much as they train and condition their body. Physical fitness and mental fitness are equal. They take both very seriously in peak performance. Emotional agility, learning to recognize your emotions as data, not getting hooked by it and being triggered by it and reacting emotionally out of it, but understanding that every emotion has its purpose. To have this language of understanding your emotions a little bit more so you don't get hooked by them, you can unhook yourself, recognize it, and respond appropriately in life, in your relationships and conversations, having the agility to bounce back and forth and having space in between the stimulus, the emotional reaction, and your response. Responsibility. Peak performers often do things because of things bigger than themselves. Now, there's a quote that I love that I always remember when I'm doing public presentation or performances. And the quote goes like this: when you focus on wanting to bless rather than impress, then you have nothing to stress. Lastly, staying present. Practice mindfulness, mindful engagements, whether it's drinking a cup of water, be fully engaged in the task at hand. Maybe it's putting a 3-foot putt and you're practicing, not being mindless, but being mindful. Staying present is a skill that you can train. And the more you can train it, the more you're going to tap into peak performing states. Now, all 10 of these guideposts is a way for us to recognize where we are, what we're lacking, and what we need to work on to create more peak performance in our life. Here's what I want you to do as an exercise. If you look through peak performers and all 10 guideposts, identify the ones that you feel like are your strengths, what you're naturally inclined to do or what you're naturally good at. Go ahead and write those down, whether it be, I have a good sense of responsibility, my spiritual walk, that's really strong in my life, or I have a great ability to stay focused. Nothing really distracts me. When I'm intended to focus on a particular task, I do it. Maybe it's physical fitness. I love working out. I love keeping my body healthy. I eat well. I work out. I take care of my body as a temple. These things I naturally do. Whatever it is, write your top 3. If you don't have 3, just write 1 or 2. Whatever you feel like you're strong in. Now, on the flip side, identify the ones that you're weak in. What are some things that I'm not necessarily investing my time in doing that I want to do more of, and I recognize this is a weakness in my life? So maybe it's mental fitness. I train my body, but I don't train my mind. I don't actively pursue after mental training or do any kind of mental exercises to keep my mind sharp. Maybe it's relationships. Like, yeah, I have good relationships, but I don't really know myself, and I don't really have anyone that I can really lean on. I have 1 or 2 kind of friends, but I need to cultivate a better support system in my life. And I need to spend some time recognizing my own self and my own triggers. Maybe it's excellence. Maybe I settle for mediocrity. Maybe I need to kind of push myself a little harder to set a higher bar, high standards, and pursue after excellence in every single task that I do. I half-ass things, and I know that about myself. Maybe that's an area I can work on a little more. Whatever it is, identify what those weaknesses might be in the acronym performers. And take that list, recognize your strengths, recognize your weaknesses, and here you are. You're starting to cultivate that relationship the recognition of your own self-awareness, what you're strong in and what you're weak in. If you can identify some things that you're weak in and you have active like activities and exercises that you do to improve on those weaknesses, then you're on your way to develop more peak performance in your life. I can't wait to dive in for more on peak performance mindset on the Mastering Mindset podcast. I'll see you next week.